Please give it up for Juan Enriquez.
So there's an actor called Dustin Hoffman. And years ago, he made this movie, which some of you may have heard of, called The Graduate. And there's two key scenes in that movie. The first one is the seduction scene. I'm not going to talk about that tonight. The second scene is where he's taken out by the old guy to the pool. And as a young college graduate, the old guy basically says one word: it's plastics. And the only problem with that is it was completely the wrong advice. So Silicon Valley was just being built in 1967 when this movie was released. So had the graduate heard the right one word, maybe he would have ended up on stage, maybe with these two. So as you're thinking of that, what word of advice would you give people? I think the answer would be LIFECODE. LIFECODE is the various ways we have of programming life. So instead of programming computers, we're using things to program viruses, or retroviruses, or proteins, or DNA, or RNA, or plants, or animals, or a whole series of creatures. And as you're thinking about this incredible ability to make life do what you want it to do, what it's programmed to do, what you end up doing is you end up taking what we've been doing for thousands of years, which is breeding, changing, mixing, matching, all kinds of life forms, and we accelerate it. And this is not something new. The difference today, to pick a completely politically neutral term, is we're beginning to practice intelligent design. And that means that instead of doing this at random and seeing what happens over generations, we're inserting specific genes, we're inserting specific proteins, and we're changing life code for very deliberate purposes. And that allows us to accelerate how this stuff happens. Let me just give you one example. Some of you occasionally might think about sex. And we kind of take it for granted how we've changed sex. And what's happened with sex over time is normally sex equals baby, eventually. But in today's world, sex plus pill equals no baby. And again, we think that's perfectly normal and natural, but that has not been the case for most of human history. And it's not the case for animals. And what it does is it gives us control so sex becomes separate from conception. Then we've been playing with stuff that's a little bit more advanced, like art. Not in the sense of painting and sculpture, but in the sense of assisted reproductive technologies. Assisted reproductive technologies are things like in vitro fertilization. And when you do in vitro fertilization, what you're doing is you're separating sex, conception, baby. So you've separated the baby from the body, from the egg. Think about twins. So you can freeze sperm, you can freeze eggs, you can freeze fertilized eggs. Well, that's a good thing if you're a cancer patient. You're about to go under chemotherapy, or you're about to go under radiation. So you save these things, you don't irradiate them. But if you can save them and you can freeze them, and you can have a surrogate mother, it means that you decouple sex from time. It means you can have twins born, 50 years. In 100 years, 200 years. So this life code stuff turns out to be a superpower. It turns out to be this incredibly powerful way of changing viruses, of changing plants, of changing animals, perhaps even of evolving ourselves. It's something that Steve Elvins and I have been thinking about for a while. This has some risks. Like every powerful technology, like electricity, like an automobile, like computers, this stuff potentially can be misused. There are consequences to acting, and there are consequences to not acting, like curing deadly diseases, which, by the way, is completely unnatural. When we put vaccines into people, we are putting unnatural things into their body because we think the benefit way outweighs the risk. Some of these treatments actually end up changing your blood type, or they'll put male cells in a female body, or vice versa, which sounds absolutely horrible until you realize the reason you're doing that is you're substituting bone marrow during cancer treatments. So by taking somebody else's bone marrow, you may be changing some fundamental aspects of yourself, but you're also saving your life. What all this does is it flips Darwin completely on his head. See, for 4 billion years, what lived and died on this planet depended on two principles, on natural selection and random mutation. And so what lived and died, what was structured, has now been flipped on its head. And what we've done is we've created this completely parallel evolutionary system where we are practicing unnatural selection and non-random mutation. So let me explain this. This is natural selection. This is unnatural selection. We started breeding wolves thousands of years ago in Central Asia to turn them into dogs. And then we started turning them into big dogs, and we started turning them into little dogs. But if you take one of the chihuahuas you see in the Hermes bags on Fifth Avenue, and you let it loose on the African plain, you can watch natural selection happen. So as you're thinking of life code, let's think of 5 principles. We have to take responsibility for this stuff. And the reason we have to take responsibility is because we're in charge. These aren't random mutations. We engineered this. And it's the Pottery Barn rule. You break it, you own it. Principle number 2, we have to recognize and celebrate diversity in this stuff. There have been at least 33 versions of hominids that have walked around this earth. Most all of them went extinct except us. But the normal and natural state of this earth is we have various versions of humans walking around at the same time, which is why most of us have some Neanderthal in us, some of us have some Denisova in us, and some in Washington have a lot more of them. Principle number 3, we have to respect other people's choices. Some people will choose to never alter. Some people will choose to alter all. Some people will choose to alter plants but not animals. Some people will choose to alter themselves. Some people will choose to evolve themselves. Diversity is not a bad thing. Because even though we think of humans as very diverse, we came so close to extinction that all of us descend from a single African mother. And the consequence of that is there's more genetic diversity in 55 African chimpanzees than there are in 7 billion humans. Number 4, we should take about a quarter of the earth and only let Darwin run the show. We should not run every evolutionary decision on this planet. We want to have our evolutionary system running. We want to have Darwin's evolutionary system running. And it's just really important to have these two things running in parallel and not overwhelm evolution. The last thing I'll say. This is the single most exciting adventure human beings have been on. This is the single greatest superpower humans have ever had. It would be a crime for you not to participate in this stuff because you're scared of it, because you're hiding from it. You can participate in the ethics, you can participate in the politics, you can participate in the business, you can participate in just thinking about where medicine is going and where industry is going and where we're going to take the world. It would be a crime for all of us not to be aware when somebody shows up at a swimming pool and says one word, just one word. If you don't listen, if that word is life code. Thank you very much.